Hey there, I'm Andrew Stewart from Backstage Lowdown. Today, my co-host Lance, he's on hiatus, but I've got a very special guest for you today. Today, we're going to get nostalgic. We're going to be sitting down with the original voice of CFNY, Ivor Hamilton. We're going to be talking the documentary CFNY, The Spirit of Radio. So get ready, grab your popcorn. Here we go. But before we get started, this episode is sponsored by Look Digital Marketing. From stunning websites to full service digital marketing, they help your business shine online. See the difference with Look Digital Marketing. Visit lookmarketing.ca today. Look no further. I appreciate you joining me today.
Well, I have no problems. I love doing this to try and help promote our events. And I know you already, had a good conversation with Alan back at the end of January, so I took a good listen to that. But I was there earlier, so
yeah. I mean, you were really in the heart of that era that the film is actually about.
Yes.
So we're talking about CFNY, The Spirit of Radio. You're one of the co-producers on it, along with several others. Maybe you could just start us out by telling the audience that's going to be actually coming to see the film at one of these venues across the country, what those early days of CFNY were like, and maybe what they're going to be experiencing when they actually come to this viewing, and how it might be a little bit different than what's actually been presented on TVO.
Well, first of all, we've done a couple out of the gate. We were in Toronto at Ground Controller in February, and then we did. Then David Marston did one. It wasn't a film presentation, but he did a spoken word thing. But we were there as well. So we didn't show the film that night. But then we were in Montreal this past week at the BAM Gallery, which was fantastic. And then at the Biltmore out in Oshawa this past Saturday, and it was a great night. I mean, great experience for people. We had a wonderful time, and things are mixed up a little bit of the people that are out to the shows. Our show in Kitchener this Friday night will have myself, Liz Janik, and local DJ who was a CFNY DJ as well, David Doc Height, and I know he's the local promoter. And we got Gary Stewart, who is very well known in the city, who booked Super Skate 7 and Bingham and Park, and I know stuff up at University of Waterloo as well over the years, and I knew him well from those early roadshow days. Now the film itself, and what I found from going out to attending these shows regionally is I did ask people to put their hands up and go, how many people here have seen the TVO version? Just about everybody had seen it. I was like, okay. So, we sort of took in a lot of feedback once that TVO version came out. A lot of people just said we hadn't seen enough. We haven't got it. There wasn't enough in the original one. What happened to the Casbys? What happened? Where's Pete and Geets? And so there was all this feedback on things that weren't in it. Now there was a version that was floating around before, and the executive producers, that was myself, Alan Scott Turner, and two other folks that weren't known CFNY DJs, but both very well known in the film business, had all not really liked that version very much. Like, we were like, this version, we actually didn't let it come out. We are just, we voiced our opinions to the film company Highball and said,
right,
we can't let this film come out the way it is. There was too many inaccuracies in the film, things that probably shouldn't have been in the film in the first place. There was a bit of confusion on the Spirit of Radio era as to when that was. It kind of went a little too far the other way. And so there was a whole bunch of things that we felt very strongly that we felt should have been changed. And Highball were fantastic. They said, "Okay, so tell us what you want changed, and we'll make those changes." And so we went through a lot of the scripts or of the interviews that were done, and there was about 60 to 70 interviews that were done over the course of a year for that film. So we just went to the ones that we thought, I don't understand why X person is not wasn't in the film, or this person I thought was really interesting in the film. Let's put some more of them into in there. So that's sort of this new 90-minute version is basically I guess it's in a way not directed by us, but man, it had our input and approval to make it more accurate and giving the people what they really were asking for in there. So I think people will be pretty pleased with it.
That's very cool that one Highball was even willing to consider making those changes that you and Matt Schichter brought to them and could actually put together this movie the way that you felt that it should be seen, and I suppose give us a better recollection, a better history of what was really happening at that time, that really just couldn't be shown within that hour that went out on TVO originally.
Well, I think the TVO stuff, like some of the very early day stuff, um, we just we couldn't come up with a lot of visual assets, right? I mean, there's great, I could sit there and tell you stories all day, and we can write books about it. And
Hmm.
there's that early '80s era. People weren't walking around with cameras. There weren't handy cams and things like that back then, and so we just didn't have a lot of access to footage of things that we would have loved to, have shown. So it was like, okay, we're going to do some animation of the little yellow house at 340 Main Street, or there's a lot of the pictures in there are out of my personal collections and personal collections of others that worked there. So that was with Matt Schichter, it was like, man, he goes, Ivor, I can't, there's certain things we just can't do. And I get it. And, animation and certainly AI has come into play, but there's very little of that. I mean, there was some things that were, made kind of 3D and animated that went
Sure.
into the film, but that just kind of, highlighted some certain things. But those, especially those very early days, we just didn't have a lot of, visuals to put to it. So we kind of had to rely on still pictures, some interviews that kind of went into graphics. Like there's a all night Andre talking to Geddy Lee doing an interview, and then sort of there's graphics that go up on the screen. That wasn't in the original piece, but it's now in this extended piece. There was a lot of people who were very passionate about the Garys. And in the original movie, there is a Gary Cormier, but there is no Gary Top. And Gary Top was, I mean, he was such a, important part of the Toronto independent music scene and what we did with concerts and presents of bands that came to town. So he's in the movie now, and that was, I think, super important that he be included. So there were a few things, like I said, it's like, why wasn't this band or why wasn't this artist or personality not included? So we were able to just go, hey, here's some great pieces that I think that people will really like, and that's a part of it. Like my early days at CFNY, I mean, it was I started in 1977, straight out of college. My first couple of weeks, I was in the broadcast course at Humber College, as so many other people were over the years that were in the radio business.
Right.
And I went in to do tape the library up because they didn't have any tape on the library. So me and a couple of other people went and did that in the fall of '77. And then I went back for a second internship after the course director ripped me a new one for playing punk records on the Humber radio uh, college radio station, the cafeteria. He goes, "You ever play another punk record on my station, you'll be out of the course. But by the way, there's an opportunity for you to go to CFNY." And I'm like,
We have the
all
place
right,
for you
all
and your
right.
music.
We'll send you up. We'll send you up to CFNY. So I mean, I was back a second time in less than 6 months, and so I knew Bruce Hayting, who was the program director and music director before David Marsden was, and so he was great. And I was back, in the music, working in the music library, 1 or 2 days a week as an intern. And then these radio stations, um, they're short on everything. So it's like, hey, Ivor, can you work the control room board? We need an operator on the weekend. And I'm like, oh, of course I can. Of course, I had no idea. And I go to Terry McElligott, who was the on-air DJ at the time. I'm like, Terry, man, can you please help me with this? And so he did, right? And so I got a job doing the weekend classical programming, which was actually hosted by Liz Janik, who's going to be coming up to Kitchener on Friday at Waterloo as well. So I did the operating board, and then I started coming back doing production stuff. And so I was like a guy in high fidelity. It was like I came to the radio station every day and hung out and just was working, and I was there practically 5 or 6 days a week. And they finally said after a year, well, we'll give you a job in the music department. And so I started in March of '79, and I don't know, about a month and a half later, the whole station went to shit when they went into receivership with the Allen brothers. So, my career started off at, I was on a huge salary of $7,000 a year to begin with, and was living large. And then we went into receiverships. Like, there's no money for anything.
Wow.
And so, but David Marsden had started. He had started as an announcer, doing evenings. So I got to know him quite well. And he used to ask me questions. He goes, "Do you think we should, maybe we should do, some of these other things, or don't you think that the station could be run differently or whatever?" And I was like 20 years old, 19, 20 years old. So, I was kind of like, the young guy with, who knows what, whatever. But I mean, I was there because of the music, really. And I was fortunate. I grew up in Brampton. I went to school in Brampton and Bramalea, or Bramalea rather, which is very close to Brampton. And a bit of the misconception in the documentary was in this, oh, you could only hear it for, 5 blocks or whatever. It's like you could hear it for not, within Brampton anyway, right? So there was a
Yeah.
whole little clique of my friends that went to high school, and we'd always listen to Chum FM back in the day, and that was
Yeah.
it. That was the cool radio station. In '75, I moved to England, but my mother was a school teacher at the school I went to, and so I didn't get away with much. We moved to England on an exchange program, and I was like, oh man, I didn't really want to do it, but whatever, I didn't have a choice. So
No,
it ended up that, of course, I got exposed to Radio Caroline, the pirate radio station out of the North Sea, and I listened to Radio Luxembourg, and I listened to John Peel, and the Saturday afternoon programming on the BBC. So, I mean, I just got blasted with music that nobody else got to hear for entire year. And then I come back to Brampton in 1976, and all my friends said, we don't listen to Chum FM anymore. They suck. But we listen to CFNY, right? And we had heard of CFNY a little bit prior to that when it was CHIC FM. And he said, we listen to CFNY. And the wonderful thing about CFNY when they were 850 watts or whatever it was,
yeah.
especially when you're young, when you're, 12, 13 years old, and you call the radio station, the top 40 radio station. I want my request played, right? And of course, they never play your request. If you're lucky, if you ever got through, right? You never got through, right? Well, CFNY, I got through every time, and it was
They picked up the phone.
they picked up the phone, and All Night Andre played literally played every song I ever asked for. So do you think I was going to be hooked? I loved the place. We loved it. All my friends loved it. And so, for me, when I got my job at CFNY, I mean, it was a dream job for me. It was like I couldn't believe it. I mean, everybody else in the radio business, they send you, your first job is off to, Northwest Territories or nowhere, northern BC, a little country station or a news station or something like that. And here's me working at you know, the station that played the greatest music ever. And I was influencing it right away because
Yeah.
I was, the music that I brought back with me from England. And then I went back to England again in the summer of '77 when the punk thing hit. And and I bought every punk record that I could find and every new wave thing, and plus every other genre of music, and I brought it back with me, and there I am in the work in the music department. It's like, hey, you guys heard the Motors? Hey, you guys want to play Eddie and the Hot Rods? And like,
So
so
that's really how you became known as the import guy.
it was pretty quick. And when I started full time, so they had people that came in every once in a while. They'd invite the guys from Bomb Records, which was an import company at the time. They would invite them in, and Keith Elshaw, who was there, one of the early DJs, I remember him, he invited in Ben Hoffman, who was the guy who owned the Record Peddler. And Ben came in and they were having a great time, and they had the first Buzzcocks independent Spiral Scratch EP. I remember them, they had that on the air and a few other things. So I met Ben, and like the next thing I know, I'm going down to the Record Peddler all the time. And Bruce Hayding was doing the import show, but he was playing the same shit all over all the time, right? He didn't really get a lot of the new, he didn't have really a means to get a lot of the music.
Mm.
But I was living at home at the time. I wasn't paying any rent. I
So
spent
you had
my
a little bit of spare cash to go down to the record peddler.
I went to the Record Peddler and spent all my income on imports at the time. So they kind of went, well, Ivor's got a lot of imports he brings into the station, because I'd bring my records into the station and they would like, well, can we tape it so we can play it or whatever. So um, and then once David came in, he was fantastic about that whole situation. I mean, he really wanted us to be a station who played music first. It drove him crazy if we got beat by any competition. It was a very big part of it. So I had an unlimited budget for music, which,
Wow.
like, seriously,
Things changed, and it changed awful quick, it sounds.
yeah, like that. He was like, whatever. I mean, I would have all the music papers from the UK, and I had Music Week, which was like, kind of like the industry trade magazine. They'd save it for me, and they only brought it in for one or two other people because it was an
Yeah.
industry thing. But it was the Bible, because it had a listing of everything that was coming in the next couple of months over there, and I would just look at it and go, get this, and this, and then I would go down to the store and spend the afternoon in there, and I would go when the records came right in, and I would have them back, and if something was like big or something that I just went and go, oh, we got to play this. It's like it was on the air. I'd get it on the air right away.
Were you
So
buying 45s at that time, or were you buying full albums?
both, both.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I mean that at that era too, the 12-inch single really, became very prominent. So I mean, but I would buy albums all the time. I would buy compilations. It didn't really matter to me. I mean, if there was a new album by somebody, or a 12-inch or a 7-inch. I mean, I've um, amassed a massive 7-inch collection to this day that extends from that era, right? And I know a
Right.
lot of people who did the same, right? Who they'd hear things on, I mean, it's a wonderful thing about this documentary that, I'm meeting people now that they said, you changed my life. The music that you guys played on the station changed my life and my musical taste or whatever. I mean, there was a guy in Montreal
Yeah.
last week who was working on a musicology PhD at the university up there, and but his specialty was prog music. And he came out and saw the documentary last week, and he goes, "I think I'm going to have to change. I'm going to have to change my degree and my philosophy on it." And I was like, "Okay." And there was four young women who came out. They weren't any more than 20 years old, and Ralph Alfonso, who ran um, the show up there in Montreal for us, he invited them out, and they're like, and they just started their first fanzine, and they said, can this is amazing. Can we interview about the documentary? I'm like, of course you can, So it really made me happy that we've got, people still feeling how influential the radio station is, even though they're being turned on to what it was now, and from what we were doing 45 years ago is just phenomenal. I mean, I had a 35-year career at two record labels after I left CFNY, and this is so much more important to people than my time at the labels. Although I did some pretty cool things when I was working. I worked at Polygram and then spent
Yeah.
years at Universal Music, and had a wonderful time because I ended up working with many of the bands that I grew up with and loved back in the day. So I kind of was able to, bring some of that back to CFNY in the later years after, into the 90s and the 2000s.
Hmm. Did you find that it made it easier coming from radio once you went over to Polygram when you started working with the various artists, the fact that you already had a relationship with the music and with the artists?
In some instances it was, but it was a huge learning curve. There is so much more when you go into the business side of things, and not that CFNY wasn't a business, it was, but it was a different business. You were,
Yeah.
responsible for very different things. I mean,
At
I
that point, you're a bit of a tastemaker.
yeah,
You're kind of leading everybody kind of through this journey of music that you're presenting, and as the expert for us.
yeah.
But now it's
Well,
different. It's now the promotion side. It's the marketing side
it
that
was, you're at a label and they have lots of product, and it's not like, they would give you a list of, when I started out being a promo guy, so
yeah,
they would say, these are our priorities. These are the records that want to get on the radio at the time. We're talking, 1989 onwards. And so these are the things we want to get on the radio. These are the things we want publicity coverage of, that sort of thing. And these are the things that we need to do things at retail with. And so that's, I had to really, bite the bullet on things because I was out there working on records from bands that I really, really um, initially despised when I was at CFNY. But next thing I know, it's like I'm working at Polygram. I had to eat. I had a house or a life to live and bills to pay. So I'm working on Def Leppard records and Bon Jovi records and Vanessa Williams and then the Eddie
yeah,
Gittins catalog and the ABBA catalog. And so you take those things that you had when you discovered music at CFNY and just and the research, because I always used to do a lot of research on when I did my shows and things. And you apply a lot of that to when you're working with these bands and imparting your knowledge on going back, especially when I was going to radio stations to work them on records and things like that. And here's the reasons why. And the great joy to me, I guess, after the fact was that in certain instances there were a few. Occasionally there was pet projects that I would have that I had some really good success with getting it on other radio stations other than CFNY. And it was great, certainly, to go back and get records on CFNY. I love that.
yeah,
But it was great when I go, yeah, I got like the Beautiful South, for example, when they were, formerly the House Martins going in Beautiful South. And they had their very first single. I had it on just about every radio station in Ontario. And that was the only and it wasn't anywhere else in the country. It was just my sort of territory, and I took that one under my wing and really decided that we should work with that. So there was some great joys with that, and then later on in my career, I spent a lot of time working with the Tragically Hip, and that was like
mhm,
especially on the reissues that they did. So I had an incredible amount of input into what went into those, and worked very closely with the band. Same with Sam Roberts and the Matthew Good band, and early in the '90s, I worked with Boot Sauce, which I know a lot of people don't really care for anymore, but that's okay. It's people can like what they like,
yeah,
but I when Sarah Harmer was another one too, and it was also very gratifying when you take a project from scratch and have it become very, very successful. It was like I had the Matthew Good's Beautiful Midnight album, and it came out shortly after the merger between Polygram and Universal Music,
right,
and the SoundScan era had just started in Canada. And I remember the chairman getting up, and he had some early intel on what was going to happen that week, and he goes, "I'm so proud to say that Matthew Good's going to come in at number one in Canada." and it it did. This Beautiful Midnight came at number one, and it was ahead of Limp Bizkit, it was ahead of Britney Spears, it was ahead of like whatever all at the time. So things like that made it worth my while.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I always still prided myself in um, being connected to the music of um, the philosophy of what we did at CFNY, and I was always a collector after that. I still bought alternative records. I still supported, all of these bands, and you know, on the side up until the documentary, I always sort of had something that was related to alternative music. So I
Mhm.
worked for David Marsden when he did his Iceberg network in the online early in the 2000s, and I've been doing a radio show on NY the Spirit since 2014, which kind of operates like CFNY would have never changed. And so we've always been free form. And in the last year, I've been on the Bridge out of Buffalo,
Yeah.
PBS affiliate, and the guy who runs it grew up listening to CFNY, and so and had a great career in the U.S. Working for a VH1 and MTV, and then he comes back. He goes, "We need a station kind of like CFNY in Buffalo," and so the Bridge they call it college radio for adults, and we play what we want. So I'm like, okay, sounds
I
like I
love
can do
it.
that one too, right? So
Yeah, no, for sure. So that early catchphrase, the spirit of radio, which is
yes,
essentially the name of this documentary. Like back then, was it just a catchphrase for you, or did it mean something even at those early days, or was it more so when you've had some time to reflect on your time there, and that that it that it really cemented that era.
I think it did. I mean, it was. I mean, I think the thing with it was that we were, you know, we were very unique, and um, we had the freedom to do what we wanted to do. I mean, if you ever listen to that 102.1 band song, and they also on that song is like, shove the Billboard charts in the back seat. I mean, we didn't even have any charts, at the time, and I've done a bunch of guest spots on today the Edge has a time machine program, which is kind of fun. It's like they look back on certain eras, certain weeks and certain years, and so they started doing 80s ones this past year. So I got asked to be a guest on it, and so the fellow who does the show is a great guy, Dusty Lawless, and he called me and he asked about. He goes, "So Ivor, we're gonna feature songs from September of 1982 that were on the CFNY chart at that time." And I said, "Well, Dusty, that's all good in theory, but we didn't have any charts back then. We weren't following any. So, so I don't know, but I can give you some intel as to what was being played on the radio station at the time." So, in essence, what he couldn't really do was like, for instance, he would say, "Oh, I don't know, the Specials,
Yeah.
Ghost Town, September 82." And I'd be like, well, we would have played the import that would have come out in November the previous year. And I'm just making that up.
Yeah.
But my point was that we weren't, we were not really following, what the record companies, priorities were for international acts. If something had come out earlier, if we had our hands on it, we were going to just play it. And so anyway, it would that and the spirit of radio is just kind of like, the freedom to be yourself, the freedom to play what you want to play, the special relationship that we had with listeners. It was all and accepting different walks of life, and the freedom of the music that just went to different genres. And I mean, we didn't have a problem in those very early days when we played Budgie records, and we played Iron Maiden records, and we played Motorhead records, but we also played Linton Kwesi Johnson and Muda Baruka and Yellow Man records and things like that. And then it was like, oh, Kid Creole and the Coconuts, and then as the the new romantic stuff came in. It's like, okay, well, we play the Spoons and we play the Duran Duran, which more, on the pop side, but that was fine. There was different tastes, and we all accepted that. So
Yeah, that Duran Duran, it kind of slipped in under the new wave uh, genre that was coming through.
yeah, I mean, it's
But I
funny
can
though.
see where how now that you say it, I think even back then it was getting a lot of pop radio airtime.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny though on the director. There was, the only show that was programmed was we programmed the morning show. It's been Pete and Geets, and so we give them their music to play, and they just decided, and for whatever reason, the morning shows were always special. It's like they basically did what they wanted. He goes, you know what? We don't like Duran Duran. We're not playing it. Okay, and then so it was
Can
the
you do that nowadays?
no, you get fired, right? So anyway, the producer of the morning show, his name was Kevin O'Leary, and he went to Australia for took a leave of absence. So they bring in this other guy from operations, Earl Veal, and he's gonna do the morning show. And I was like, okay, I guess we'll get back on track. And he goes, nope, I made a pact with Kevin. Our listeners do not want to hear Prince, and they do not want to hear Duran Duran. And I was like, I'm like, whatever, right? Like, so you had things like that where the morning show got it, and the other thing that used to happen, this was also from somewhat the sort of the very early '80s is we would mark up all the records and they could play whatever they wanted, but we would kind of rate the songs and go, this is song got 4 stars, or we feel this is the strongest song. There was one guy, Keith Elshaw. He purposely would play the worst rated song on the record, right? He put automatically in Dollars to Donuts. The first song on the air would be the one that we hated off the record,
So
right?
there was actually a bit of a philosophy that went into what was actually getting played, at least by you
I
guys.
think, there was recommendations, right?
Yeah.
So if you didn't want to, you could play the album and it's like, you know what, we really think that, Damaged Goods by Gang of Four is like, that's a pretty good song. We think it's better than Ether, just making that up again.
Yeah.
But that was kind of like, yeah. So we would just, give our 2 cents on it. And, there were records that I thought were great. It had gone in the record that went in the library. And, I'd come back, 3 weeks later and I go through it and everybody on the staff didn't think it was good. It never got played. Said, okay, whatever. I mean, if they didn't get played, then that was it. But I mean, eventually, as time went on, you had to play certain things because there was just too much of, there was too much of things that you're this just, the record just got ignored, and we put some systems in as time went on.
Yeah. Well, Ivor, we're actually kind of coming up on to our time here.
Okay.
I always like to finish up the show with a bit of a rapid fire round.
Okay.
And it's really just a easy way for people to get to know you. And it's as simple as shoes or boots. And, you pick
No
boots
problem.
because you're not crazy.
Okay.
But it just very quick and simple. Now, having said that, I don't think that there's been one time when somebody has chosen both, or there's been a story that has come along with it. So if it goes off to the left, that's okay.
Okay.
So let's get going. First off, I've got college radio buzz or record label hype.
Oh, college radio, but college radio all the time. I record label hype. I go back and we were Scott Turner and I who do this Music Milestones
Yeah.
YYZ podcast, and we were talking about a record last week by a band called The Call, and they were an okay band, but man, they got hyped as shit on us, man. They were really hyped as shit, and I went back and listened to it last week, and it was like they kind of sound like Simple Minds, and I think Jim Kerr guessed it on the record and Robbie Robertson, but man, it
Mm,
just hasn't stood the test of time. But yeah, records that got too much hype, and it's just like, as Public Enemy would say, don't believe the hype.
nice. Okay, gut instinct or chart data.
Oh God, what do you think? Gut instinct for
Gut instinct
gut
for
instinct,
sure.
start data. I mean, listen, this is the downfall of part of the music business these days, right? Because it's all about the data, right? And
Yeah.
what my later days at Universal Music, I was working trying to get a bunch of reissues out and have these reissues done and into the marketplace, and also trying to get them out in other parts of the world, right? If you don't have huge streaming data on on classic acts, you haven't got a prayer with getting it across the finish line to get it out there. And it's I'm like going, okay, well, that's fine. Do you think they would have even released the Velvet Underground? Do you even think they would have released the first Ramones record? Like they didn't have any fucking data on those records. They
No,
just like there were people believed in these things. So you
it was
got
just something that kind of like hit you right in the
they were
center of the chest.
and they were very different. They were very different bands. So you need to take those chances. And there's such there's also examples of the labels would stick with bands for a long time, like 4 or 5 records before they finally got big, got hits and things. And today that just doesn't happen today. So yes, we'll go with the gut feel on that.
Beautiful. New wave explosion or classic rock dominance.
Well, I mean, I like my classic rock. I will say I do like a lot of classic rock, but my classic rock is a lot different than a lot of other people's classic rock, right? So,
It's funny now when you're listening to classic rock and what is actually coming across on those stations. It's kind of like I was listening to this on CFNY like some 35
well,
years
they
ago.
they they when Q107 was and CFNY went under the same roof, they moved a ton of the older music from CFNY over to Q107. So once in a blue moon, you'd hear a Depeche Mode track or a Blue Moon or a New Order track on Q107. But the guitar bands like the Cult and the REM stuff all kind of moved over to Q107. So anyway, my classic rock is what I have in my, the bands that I like aren't really the ones that you hear on the radio because classic rock ones, honest to God, I have a large list of songs I never need to hear again because classic rock killed them. So new wave explosion is where I would go. Yes.
Right. Now this kind of takes us back to the second one, but artist development or instant hit.
Um, hmm. Well, this is a little bit of both because artist development is so key in building a career and where you can get an artist to. And I experienced a lot of that with my time at Universal and Polygram, but the
Hmm.
artist development um, because somebody might have a vision for something, right? And somebody, I remember one of our artists was like, said we really want something that's like the 70s prog, some of the stuff that Roger Dean would have on his cover with some of those classic Yes records. And then I looked at the artwork of this particular artist and I was like, oh my God, it looks like Star Castle. It's like, and they were a really bad imitation band, right? And so you have to go back and work on those things. Let's work on that till you get it right. Like Crown Lands or whatever. It's like
Yeah.
great band, but fuck, I think in places they were too much sounding like Rush. So it's like I could have gone, could have worked with them, a little bit more. But at the same time, that song by Afro Man comes along and remember Psy and that, it was like
Yeah.
looking at it going instant club hit, a
Oh yeah.
trillion views and people love it. So, it's a bit of both.
Yeah, for sure. Uh, Late night programming freedom or daytime audience reach.
Well, I think for me personally, it is the late night programming because that is where you can really spread your wings. You can try things. Having been on the label side too, there were a couple of DJs around the country, and one of the things that you really wanted to do as part of like, when you were putting out records is like, you really wanted to know how it sounded on the radio, right? So
Yeah.
you're going, okay, well, I can go to this radio station and go at 3 a.m. and he'll just throw it on the air and I could sit in the car and see how it's going to sound, right? So you have those types of instances because you're like, nobody's ever heard this before,
Right.
and get it out on the radio. I mean, it's great. It's great when you, but you know, again, other side of the coin, when you're the mass audience or whatever. I mean, it used to. I used to love it in my CFNY days when we'd have something that you just felt was going to be big. And so I remember there was a couple of occasions that we chose the morning show to premiere an album on, right? Let's do it on the Pete and Geet show. We're going to play whatever it was, the Tears for Fears record or a New Order record or whatever it was, but we chose that because we know it would have hit the biggest audience at the time. I'm not so, you know, in the end, I'm not quite so sure if that worked. I think where records, to me, if it was new music, probably would have had the most impact would have been the early evening show, because people are either going home in their cars, or at that time they would have listened. You know, as you'll see in the documentary, and I'd mentioned that I had said this about David Marsden, and I said in the documentary outside of CFNY, and what I meant to clarify was it was before CFNY. And so when he was at Chum FM, he was the first person to ever play Rush on the radio, the first person to play the Dark Side of the Moon album weeks and weeks before it came out, and The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway by Genesis. Those were all premiered on Chum FM, but they were on his evening show. So I found that, you know, if you had like something in the, you know, early evenings, that would have great impact.
Oh, awesome. Breaking an unknown Canadian band or importing a UK hit early.
Hmm. Well, I kind of covered that on how great it was to, you know, break a Canadian band, and you could say,
Yeah.
you know what, you say, these are this band is ours. You know, we discovered them or whatever, and you know, again, I refer to the documentary, and I'd make it clearer as that CFNY played Teenage Head 2 years before any other commercial radio station, because we had their demo tapes and we're playing them on the air. We hadn't before anybody else. But hey, on the import side, I mean, listen, we had the Joshua Tree by U2 weeks before anybody else did. We played the songs from the Big Chair, and Polygram hated us for it. Because they had a plan, you know, a giant plan to market it across the country, but we had it before they did. I remember remember the rep from IRS coming in, and he holds up a cassette. He goes, "Ivor, I got the new REM album." And I reach behind my desk, and I'm like, "I've got the album." And so you know, playing these hard to find records, or something that was highly anticipated, playing them early, yeah, brought great pleasure, and people knew CFNY for that. You know, you knew you were gonna, you knew you were gonna hear it first, but you knew you were gonna hear um, a wide variety of things on that record. You'd hear, 5 songs or 6 songs, or certain instances you'd hear the whole album of something brand new, and you could really be satisfied. It's like, wow, that Kate Bush record is phenomenal, or that Simple Minds record is phenomenal, or the Love and Rockets or Bauhaus or whatever it was.
Well, that has actually been another episode of Backstage Lowdown. Ivor, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me and run through this. Very excited about seeing the full documentary coming out, CFNY, the spirit of radio as it hits across the country. I've already gone in, like we've already gone beyond time here, and I thank you just for taking that little bit of extra time with me today.
It's my pleasure. We'll see everybody in Waterloo, and then all the merch will be there with us. If you guys want to get into it, we're bringing it with us, and then we're in Hamilton, and that's going to be fantastic. And then we're heading out to Vancouver and working on some other stuff as well.
Beautiful. Thanks so much. Take care, Ivor.
Thanks so much. All the best.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.